When are you gonna buff Jin? WTF? Taco with the 61 months? Taco, Jin is strong right now. He might even be OP. If you're not in Challenger at the moment, it's a skill issue, bro.
Buff Jin!
Why aren't you 4th place on the ladder, bro? I thought you were good at this champ.
Because I haven't played League in 3 months.
Bro hasn't played League in 3 months, but chat, I'll tell you something. I saw him playing last night on Discord. Yeah, this guy's fake. This guy's a liar. I'm an AD carry main and I play mostly Draven and SAMIRA and ZERI. When are we gonna help SAMIRA and high elo? She's unplayable. You said you're gonna buff her. So my personal take is probably SAMIRA is weak. It's felt like that to me for a while. That said, SAMIRA is an AD carry who, especially in certain regions of the world, is actually very popular and very highly banned. So it is hard to necessarily just go and buff her when they're, even though on average she looks like, you know, she's kind of like lower tier, lower win rate. There are certain regions that actually pick her a lot and ban her a lot, even right now. And so she's one of those characters that, like, yeah, I could definitely see an argument for being her being weak personally, but it is not necessarily super easy to buff her given her pick rate and ban rate in specific regions. But anyways, my personal guess would be she's probably a little weak. Like, SAMIRA historically has sat about 50 to 51% win rate. That's historically where she's chilled. Whereas right now she's more in like the 48% kind of territory. So to me, I could definitely see an argument that she might be a little sag compared to where she's been over the years. Another character like SAMIRA, by the way, is like Zoe. Zoe is a character who, like, you kind of like look at her stats and she feels kind of weak, but there are certain regions that highly pick and ban her. And so it's another thing where it's like, we could buff Zoe maybe, but like, that could definitely be like a negative result for like certain regions. The opposite of this is character like another thing about a character like this is like Bel'Veth. Like, we often will nerf Bel'Veth for high MMR, and often, like, when Bel'Veth is good in high MMR, specifically in Europe, she just goes insane and like terrorizes European Challenger, whereas a lot of other regions just don't pick her. And so it's like a thing where it's like, when we're buffing Bel'Veth, it affects certain regions more. Another character like this is Seraphine. So fun fact, when AP carry Seraphine is viable, she is significantly more picked in places like NA. NA, if AP carry Seraphine is good, loves it. They're just like, oh, give me some music, throw in spells. Whereas like no one in Korea is picking her. And so whenever we're nerfing AP carry Seraphine, it's actually like, she has a very, very big difference based on region when she's powerful, like how popular she is. Jax feels bad right now and doesn't have an identity as other champions do him better. I would just disagree with that. Jax has a very real identity. He's a great scaler. He has his dodge. He's very simple and straightforward to play. I don't think Jax has really ever lacked an identity. If he's in trouble right now, it's probably just because he's weak. That's simply it. A lot of times when a character is weak, people will come to the stream and be like, this character is weak and therefore sucks, and therefore is useless, and therefore will never be good, and therefore needs a rework, right? It's kind of the idea that like the reason they're weak is because they're non-functional in the game and will never be functional. And this is very rarely true. Most characters who are weak, all they need is to not be weak. That's it. All they need is to not be weak. And I would argue, especially since Jax is like a staple character who's been in the game in 15 years, that if Jax is feeling weak, if Jax is feeling like he has no place in the game, he probably just needs buffs. The times where we rework a character is like, are they in a spot where they're weak and we won't buff them, right? There's a lot of pro play characters, right? Like, as an example, ZERI needed a rework because she was a spot where she could never be buffed, right? Like, that's rework territory. Or are they in a spot where, regardless of the buffs we do, players will never perceive them to be powerful? This is stuff like old Aurelion Soul, old TALIYAH, where it didn't matter if we buffed them. It didn't matter if we made them powerful. They still felt useless, non-functional, bad to the average player. And And so I would argue with Jax, based on what I've seen with him over 15 years, that if Jax feels like he doesn't have a place, it doesn't mean he needs to be reworked. It probably just means he needs to be buffed, because that guy tends to have a very real place in the game, being like really strong scaling top lane, dueler, skirmisher, dodge man with very simple and straightforward gameplay. So that's my take on Jax, at least. Are we planning Kayle changes? Honestly, I think it probably would make sense in the long term to buff some of Kayle's attacking and attack speed. She's been affected by a number of the attack speed changes, things like Berserker's Greaves, and so she's just has a lot less attack speed available to her in her build nowadays. Also no longer has Omnivamp. So I think long term, Kayle's probably at this point a little weak, and if we were to buff her, I would argue we should adjust her, maybe give her more attack speed on her AP ratio, maybe just give her more attack speed per level, maybe make Ginsu's synergize better with her or something. There's a lot of ways we could do it, but I think Kayle is definitely in a spot where she's probably a bit weaker than she should be in the long term, and probably her auto attacks don't feel as good as they could after all the system changes that removed attacking. That's thought on that. Do you think the honor system will ever be improved to have incentives for players to be more friendly and compassionate? I think this would be a good thing. So my perception, so actually this has happened before. So whenever we have updated the honor system, which we've done twice in League's history, the few months after updating the honor system, the toxicity in the game went down significantly. And then eventually it climbed back up. And it's kind of a thing where it's one of the ways you can stop people being nasty to each other is, punishment. But another way to stop people being nasty is positive reinforcement. It's, hey, if you're not a jerk, look at all this cool stuff you get that matters. And that's the important part, is that matters. Positive reinforcement can be really, really good. And I think one of the things that's been rough about our honor system over the years is when we put it out, it's initially cool and it seems like it matters and it seems like it cool. But then, as we leave it and we don't adjust it over time, eventually players are like, okay, this doesn't really matter to me anymore. And all the incentives and interests that might come from a positive reinforcement honor system kind of fade away. I'm not a player behavior designer, by the way. So I might just be talking randomly, whatever. But I personally believe that player behavior is a lot like anti-cheat, actually, in the idea that it's something you have to constantly keep up with. It's something that you constantly need to be adjusting and improving to keep up with the trends, basically. And so one thing I think could be really, really good for, any given game that wants to manage player behavior, not just League of Legends, is, as Dragomaster asked, a system of positive reinforcement that is constantly rewarding players in ways they care about for being positive. I think that potentially is a huge win. And the times we've done it, the times that we've added positive reinforcement, for the times we did it and the periods of times where players saw that positive reinforcement, or this is cool, I want this, this is worth it for me, we saw actually pretty meaningful reductions in players being mean to each other. So yeah, that's the thought there. Why do we add Faded Ashes instead of adjusting the AP scaling in the jungle item? Because Faded Ashes gives a more persistent damage to jungle mages in a way that felt correct. It allows them to build into things. That's another important part, is that it's important that AP junglers have somewhat of a spike that makes them good not just against their opponents, but also not just good against the jungle, but against their opponents. Whereas buffing the jungle item would have helped them clear a bit better, but it wouldn't necessarily have helped them as much versus their opponents. One of the golden ages of AP junglers was when they had Runeglaive, and one of the important parts about Runeglaive was it was a jungle item that let the AP character who bought it spike in a certain way. And so Faded Ashes is kind of a similar idea.